Bye. Bye.
Hello, do-badders. Hey, Jody Raynsford. How you doing?
Dave. I'm all right, David Hellard. How are you?
Good. We've just had a proper moan, do-badders. And we've changed to another software, another podcast recording system, and it's just super strange. Podcasts, they don't allow you to have two users. They don't allow you to have two hosts. They don't have an editor, a producer.
They're against it. They're against it. There's some reason they've gone, look, we want to protect the integrity of podcasting, so we want to prevent as many duos as possible in podcasting. If you're in the same room recording, well, that's absolutely fine. We'll allow you to do that. But if you are not together, for some reason, we really don't like that, and we're going to do everything possible to make the system as difficult as we can for you to actually podcast together.
And you're not allowed a producer as well. They can't. They have to be the same user. So
you have to be Dennis Waterman. You have to host the podcast, be interviewed on the podcast. You've got to do the production of the podcast.
So I'm using my private browsing right now, which is strange for me because I normally only use that for one thing.
Is it strange for you? Weirdly, my private browsing was already open.
Well, to now have my private browsing associated with do-badders and Jody is not really... I'm not trying to form those neural links in my head. It's not... But...
I just want to point out that I'm on holiday at my place. I'm not in prison. I know this looks like I've been. If you're watching this on YouTube, then it looks like I've been imprisoned. And because every other like work call and stuff that I've done, everyone's gone, "Are you in prison?" Just for some reason, it looks like that. I'm not. I'm in the Isle of Wight, which is in many ways a prison of the 1950s, but I'm not. That's why I'm in this.
Does that mean there's a weird white ball following you around?
That's not the Isle of Wight.
Wasn't that the 1950s? The prisoner?
Yeah, that is the prisoner. Yeah. That's Port Miriam. Have you ever been to Port Miriam?
I have. I've done a festival there.
Have
stuck
you?
In the mud. Yeah,
it is weird, isn't it? That is I do quite like it as a series, The Prisoner. Just because it's so kind of... Have you not? It's so weird. It's so... I don't even understand how it was that popular because
everyone was on drugs.
That was it. It's like psychedelic in that sense. But it is good and it's really ahead of its time. But yeah, and just weird. Really, really weird. But then so is Port Miriam. So's most of the UK, isn't it? Is weird in many senses outside of London. You could probably do a prisoner-style thing in pretty much any community in the country and everything.
So hello to the regions. That's Jody's view.
Every week I'm going to offend a different region.
Well, I want to start with a story of a proper do-badder from amongst the mists.
Oh, go on.
Kate Jaden. I mean, have you fully figured out what's transpired with Kate to do with the record?
Well, she's got... I saw that she had got the world record, so that had been confirmed, hadn't it, in terms of that. And then, again, I think it was a BBC News report where it talked about, she ran with a broken knee, so she's got a fractured knee, which essentially means that she's pretty much not going to run ultras or long distances again.
Well, actually, that makes me... Because the way I put this up as like I wasn't trying to say that was good news. I was saying more. I was talking about the other story too.
That was like, you monster! What? I was saying it's good news that the KJ can't run because it gives all of us a chance. Like, is that what you were?
Because that's obviously horrific. But yeah, and we hope you recover as quickly as you can, KJ. But no, so the do-baddiness of her record attempt. So she ran 101 marathons, and she knew that a lot of other people were also trying to get the record, who were running concurrently with her. So she was on 101, they were on 90-something. Yeah. So when she broke the world record at 101, she then announced she'd break the world record at 101 and was stopping, and was going to put in to get it officially clarified, ratified, and but it turned out that was all a tactic to try and ensure that she had the record for longer. She actually ran 5 more marathons.
Oh!
So while she'd announced that she'd done 101 marathons, she'd actually done 106. And she then applied to the Guinness World Records for 106 marathons. So all of her competitors who were there thinking, I just need to do like 1 or 2 more than 101, then stopped thinking, I'm now the new world record holder, because it hadn't been ratified and officially in the books. So she's now the world record holder of 106 marathons. I've not been following the other runners to know if they're still going, but as a strategy, that is bloody genius.
I don't know. I don't know if this is also. And I can't remember. I don't know if I misremembered that. But didn't she also say that she wasn't going to get it ratified as well originally? She said she wasn't really interested in the Guinness World Record thing, and actually it was just more about just doing it to prove that she could do it. Because you're absolutely right. There is that discrepancy between the numbers. I hadn't thought of that. That is utterly brilliant.
So I'm trying to Google now just to see, because I know there was an American runner who had gone over 100. But yeah, wow, 2nd of May, Jackie Hunt Brosma ran 104 marathons in 104 days. So, I mean, it worked.
Oh my God, that is utterly
She didn't
brilliant.
get the record. And
that is...
although in some ways the fact that it's a news story that Jackie broke the record shows that she's managed to, I think, get the publicity she probably wanted, needed, hoped for, but officially won't get the record. But then when you get the record, it takes so long anyway, it almost isn't the point of it. And so, but I think that Kate Jaden's still the record holder, which I just think is the biggest part of do baddery I've ever heard of in a record.
You can only do it once. That's the thing now. You can only do it once. So, which means that because she's basically the first person to I've ever heard of that happening, of going stealth mode as you continue the record. The thing is, everyone now
maybe she's still doing it.
Exactly, but everyone now doing a record afterwards is going to be wondering, have they really stopped? How do I know they've really stopped? What happens if they're continuing? So no one's really going to know where anyone is. And that's the thing, you're going to have to balance. You have to balance between... because the other thing that KJ did was that she raised an incredible amount of money as well. So she had to get the publicity. So you also got the publicity around it, which is great. So, but that also exposes you to other people seeing it as well. So you have to have this like really delicate balance of amount of exposure versus how much visibility they get on what you're actually doing, plus the right time to communicate to the media that you've finished. It's a delicate interplay that she's mastered that I think is, I mean, if that doesn't put you in a Do Badder Hall of Fame, I don't know what. just for that move is incredible. Yeah.
And I think we need a Do Badder term for whatever that is, whatever she's done, how she's pulled it off. But I'm at risk now of coming across as anti-Semitic, which... in an unrelated story.
But the thing is, you look anti-Semitic, so that's all. You're always. I mean, if I put you in a nice Hugo Boss suit and stood you on the steps of the Reichstag, you wouldn't look out of place, would you? So
that is true. That is
exactly. True. So you kind of, you have an air. I mean, you're not Aryan, but you have like a pseudo-Aryan look about you, I would say. That definitely puts you in charge of at least a concentration camp. bare minimum. Bare minimum, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you know, I'm
yeah.
ambitious in whatever I do. I like to think.
You'll go the
I like to think if
mile.
I was part of the Third Reich, I probably would have risen through the ranks. That's
Very
that's
quickly.
what I'd want to have been if I'd had those horrible views. But so
You would have been
I was at the airport.
You'd have been an enthusiastic Nazi, perhaps the most enthusiastic.
I like to think if I was evil, I'd be very
Effective.
good at being evil.
Very good.
Exactly. Thankfully, I've not taken that route, or have I taken it, and you don't know. But
Still time.
So we're obviously in a world where we can't discriminate against individuals, particularly cultures, rightly so. And I then discovered a potential flaw with that system.
What?
So I was flying out to, as I've taken a couple of flights recently, to Sierras now. So I was flying out to Geneva.
Yeah.
And I was on the plane with a large number of Hasidic Jew families.
Oh, yeah.
And to start with, I delighted at this because while I was walking past the toilets, one of the mums had gone to the toilet, leaving their kids outside. And I saw these kind of 4 or 5 Hasidic Jewish children then just staring at people they'd never seen before. And there was a very well-dressed black lady who walked into the women's toilets, and they were just the way they were looking at her. It was this mysticism where they were like, "Wow, who is that? What is going?" And it just brought me some joy to see their minds being blown by the outside world. And then an older gentleman, I had my MP3 player on. He's like, in the queue, he's like, "What is that thing? What does that do?" And explaining, I said to my MP3 player, realised he didn't know what that meant. I was like, "Oh, it's got all my music in so I can listen to like 10,000 songs." And I thought, this is really great. This is really fun. Kind of exposing people to new situations, is broadening the minds. Until I realised that trying to get a plane to take off on time when you have 20 families that have never really travelled before was an absolute nightmare, because none of them knew any of the basic rules of travel. Like, you put your seatbelt on, or you put your bag, most of them in the hold, then you put the other ones above you, and the bag size should be so and so and so, and all these things. And so it took about an hour. And then they didn't realise you have to be seated and at your own seat, and so my joy turned into this realisation of, yet again, another flight was going to be delayed, and purely because they didn't know the system in any way, and it made me think, like, this surely this will happen every time you get people who've never travelled before en masse with massive families, and therefore lots and lots of children who similarly are just having their minds blown by everything. So then it made me wonder, if you were the airport, if you're the plane, this is an issue for you because you get fined if you're late. And we set off an hour late purely because of the disruption caused by first-time travellers, and genuine travellers, not even first-time flyers. So it made me think, you can't discriminate, you shouldn't discriminate, but you could understand why an airline might want to discourage Hasidic Jewish travellers in the future. And is that right or is that wrong? Discuss.
Wondered where you were going with this. It's like... Well, it's difficult. The thing is, it's difficult to know, isn't it? To know whether they have travelled before. I suppose that's the difficulty, isn't it? It's difficult to know whether they have travelled before or not, because just because they're Hasidic Jews doesn't necessarily mean that they have never travelled before.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say they probably haven't travelled as a family on a plane before. I'm saying they as if it's the whole group. I'm sure maybe some within the group have, but my observations from the lack of awareness of how flights work suggests that hadn't happened before as a family, and even I don't think they are that used to traveling as a family away from their community, and that in itself presents challenges. So yeah, and that's the thing. You couldn't. But then at the same point, I wouldn't want to travel on the same plane as Hasidic Jewish families in the future if it were to be a similar situation. And does that make me discriminatory, or is that?
Well,
but would anyone want to have an hour delay of their flight, which then interrupts your follow-on flight? Give it, that's essentially no. But the only way to stop that is to discriminate. But that's wrong. So how do we resolve this?
Well, I don't know. I think there's probably a much larger group of people who cause a disruption on flights, regardless of the group that they're in. That are probably more of a priority for airlines. I don't know what you do as an airline in that situation. Well, you can't discriminate like that. I wonder what it was like when all of a sudden, I mean, air travel is it's not the cheapest it's ever been, but it's very close to being the cheapest it's ever been, particularly in the UK. And I wonder when they first got, like £29 flights and £9 flights and really kind of like flying for £1 and stuff like that. There must have been a massive swathe of people who'd never been on a flight before flying. And I wonder if that must have been an issue for that period where when did it start happening? When were the era of cheap flights? It was it wasn't until
probably mid noughties.
Yeah, it was mid noughties, wasn't it? Yeah, it definitely wasn't. It wasn't
2003, 2002s.
Yeah, I think it was. I think it was like that.
And actually, that's the time when post 9/11 they suddenly introduced a crazy number of rules as well. Well, not a crazy number of rules. It's understandable. But
pre 9/11, do you remember pre 9/11 going to the airport? We got so close to essentially just walking onto an airplane. It was just there was like the safety checks had gone right down. You in some places you barely showed a passport when you went through. And then 9/11 happened, and it all just went, totally in the opposite direction. You could turn up an airport 30, 40 minutes before a long haul flight, and you'd still be okay. Yeah. Oh God, air travel, eh? Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. None of this matters anyway, because air travel's going to be expensive again. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's travelling. It is funny.
Are you suggesting this Hasidic Jewish people can't afford expensive flights?
No, I'm not saying no one's can afford a flight. No one can afford flights. There's going to be fewer flights anyway. It's funny though, isn't it? Like my parents tell a story about when it wasn't their honeymoon, but they went to Paris when they were younger, and they by coach, of course, and they went to Paris, and it just kind of shows I'm not saying that the UK was backward or something then, but I am kind of saying it was backward by that point. But they went to Paris, and they stayed at this hotel, and they came down for breakfast the next morning, and they served them breakfast, and it was a croissant, and my parents didn't know what to do. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know how to eat it, so they just sat there waiting until someone else came down and started eating their croissant, so that they knew what they were doing. And I was like, it's just, It's funny, isn't it? Like stuff that you just, I think we've become so used to knowing how to travel and how to do those things that we just forget that not everyone has done it. Not everyone has the ability to do it. And like when you go to places like Morocco and stuff, and you get off the, you're on the train, you get off the train, and there's loads of Berber kids and stuff, and and it's like the first time they've seen an escalator. And things like that, you realise that actually there's, we do a shitload of stuff that most of the world most of the world doesn't do, but we totally take it for granted. So
and even the ability to adapt and the ability for something not to shock you or to, because you're so used to new things that you almost like, oh, what's this? Although having said that, I couldn't start a car recently because it was a smart car, and
yeah, this is like David in a car.
I realised I had to have different buttons pressed to then best the.
Are you like Thora Hurd in Last of the Summer Wine? When every time she gets in the car, accusing people of moving everything around. Oh, you've moved everything around again.
It really had. It didn't have a key.
Where's the key? What? Last time I was in a car, they had keys. Why are there fewer pedals? What?
There was no handbrake. It was baffling. But we love the grey area between what we think is right and what we think is wrong, and all those nuances. So
we extend the grey area. We like to extend that grey area as much as possible. It's a demilitarised zone of morals.
Exactly. So here's one where obviously UTMB are the new Ironman, are the new Tough Mudder, are the new. We'll charge you wherever we can. We'll exploit everything.
Evil organised. We needed an evil organisation in the race world, and they're stepping up.
Exactly. Now, when someone does things for environmental reasons, that often is where the grey area is, because suddenly you're like, are you doing this for me, or for the environment, or are you doing this for yourself and hiding behind the environment? So UTMB have made a new rule that you're no longer allowed to drive between aid stations. So they're putting on buses.
To be fair, that's cheating anyway.
That is true. That is a good point.
That should have been a rule right from the start. If I'd have known that, I'd have done many more races.
Yeah, you don't even have to buy the kit. Because,
Jesus Christ.
You just go to the t-shirt.
To be fair, it's a rule that they kept under wraps for a long time, didn't they? No one asked us. You idiots have been like running this the whole time. So
true.
What's it called? So what, supporters and support crew and everyone else, right?
So this is, and I'm assuming it's being dressed up as environmentalism, which, in that respect, is a great idea, and cutting down impact. But they're also charging like €45 for the privilege as well.
Oh, I see.
Which I think whenever someone claims environmentalism, it shouldn't turn a profit.
Yeah.
Just so you know, because then actually it's clearly just hiding behind that. So, but even the elites aren't allowed to drive in between the aid stations, and I can't see how this will possibly work, because it's fine if you've got slow runners where you can wait for a bus. Yep. I'm pretty sure there's going to be massive queues. I'm pretty sure it's going to go wrong, because these things always do. Not just UTMB, but just in general.
Yeah.
Transport is a nightmare, and predicting how many people need to be where at what point is always impossible, particularly when you're dealing with French drivers are known for striking.
I was going to say, that's the next thing I was going to go, if they're running.
Yeah, and you're also dealing with a race where the weather has a massive impact on how fast people are, and how long people stay in aid stations. All these things can dramatically vary. So how are you? But if someone's running UTMB in 30 hours, then at least there's some leeway for the support staff to be able to get across to the next aid station. But Killian's, your Francois Dane, your Courtney Dauwalter, their supporters are going to have to pay to use buses. And what happens if you could have an athlete losing UTMB because their supporter is waiting for a bus?
So what that actually means, doesn't it? It means that the people who have the ability to have bigger teams who can spread themselves out, who don't need to travel, constantly between them, are the bigger the ones that are an advantage. So
true.
it removes, it gives greater advantage to those people that have bigger names, who have bigger
Big
teams,
brands,
bigger
or
brands.
Europe, or from France, or
exactly.
locally.
So there we go. That might be part of it. Is that just UTMB, or is that all UTMB events?
All UTMB events. And also, does that have an impact that actually, if I was now a Killian, would I trust the buses, or am I doubling my support staff? And they're alternating which aid stations they go to, therefore doubling the number of people who are actually using the buses. So, first year of it happening, it's starting next week. And yeah, I just hope it works, because
starting next week.
So yeah, UTMB's next week. So
how much advance notice did they have of this?
I'm not sure, because I've not been following UTMB very closely, because I've got friends racing it, but I haven't asked them about the logistics. But I found out maybe 3 weeks ago. Yeah. It could be this was announced a long time ago. I'm not sure. But do-badders who've done it, people like G-Law, there's quite a few do-badders who've been out there. I know Damo listens to this. James, what's James' surname? And what are your views on this? Like, do you think this can work? And if there are any top end runners who've done your UTMBs, your TDSs, ACCs, what do you think? Do you think this system will be? Do you think it's profiteering, for one? And do you think this will affect the race? Because it's just another stress factor. Worrying, is your pacer going to be in there? And will you potentially change what you pack, what you carry with you? Because you might not see your support staff coming in. So, yeah, the grey area between profiteering and environmentalism.
It's not much of a grey area, really, is it?
Yeah, I guess we don't know how much it will cost to put on this system, because we don't know how many buses they're actually going to have. If it's super efficient,
but like you say, the thing with like shuttle buses and everything is that you can normally you would normally predict, wouldn't you, or be able to predict kind of the level of when most people are coming through, when the large pack of the field is a large part of the body of the field, and so you would put on more buses in association with that, and also with the elites, they're going faster. So in theory, it's one of those ones they think, okay, well, that kind of makes sense from an environmental perspective. But the reality is that it never works out like that, especially on the first running of something. So, I don't know whether, depending on how far ahead it is. But then, when you're an organisation at UTMB, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And, because people, there's so much more demand for it that if you go, oh, well, I'm not running it now, they'll just shrug their shoulders and go, well, fuck off, and don't affect us now.
Yeah, completely. Did you see about the decathlon star who had a wardrobe malfunction?
I heard about it. I didn't see it, but I did hear about it. He popped out, didn't he?
Well, this is one of those stories where we're part of the problem now by talking about it. But I want to talk about the fact that people are talking about it being part of the problem. So I don't know whether that means we're still part of the problem, or we're
part of so many problems. It doesn't matter if we're part of this problem as well. So
I won't say the individual's name, poor fella, partly because they've admitted that they're actually quite shy and don't really want the attention. But yeah, a decathlon athlete at just check. I can't remember now. There's so much sports on, whether it's a Commonwealth or the Worlds. All the Europeans, and they basically had a really bad race at the World Championships because they kept on, as you say, that the mouse was escaping the house, but then because it's such a story, that they're saying it's actually had a massive impact on their mental health because it's created so much attention for them. And so, should we be reporting about stories like this? Is my question to you, knowing that. Should we be talking about embarrassing things? Should we be talking about funny things, knowing that adds to potentially the stress of the individual? I mean, thankfully, I think we're small enough that I don't think we'd add to. We're not significantly adding to anyone's awareness.
No, well, I think you can talk about the media elements around it and about what it is that people choose to talk about, because we see this quite a lot, don't we? Like people that don't appreciate what it takes to run a PB or something like that, when they and people posting pictures of people having like shit themselves and stuff like that, and and thinking that that's quite funny, and you're like, well. It's kind of like their race. Like it's not it. While it might seem funny and it might seem like quite fun to put on social media, that is, what that actually means is that someone is so dedicated to the thing that they're doing that that whatever happens, if it wasn't a race, if it was something else, if it was someone saving a child who was in a river. And they'd shit themselves with worry and stuff like that, you wouldn't be posting about that and joking about it. Or I don't know. I find it really weird. I find it really intrusive. Like all kind of talk about things like that under the auspices of that it's quite funny. Because again, there's certain things like if a woman was running and like something popped out or something like that. That would feel. I mean, it would be covered, wouldn't it? Like the sort of gutter press in this country would cover it, and it. But you're just like, well, she's an athlete at an athletics meet, and she's doing her job, and he's doing his job, and you're distracting away from the thing that they've done, and people go, well, it's funny. We're like, well, it's not. Like you said, it causes it takes away from their performance. It adds an element of worry to the next time they do it. Like no one should have to think about worrying about stuff like that, or it's like worrying about your hair when you're running or something like that. Like they're there for performance, and if something like that happens, which I imagine happens all the time at non-televised athletic meets and stuff like that, and then no one talks about it. I don't know. I just think under the glare of the press, like that, there needs to be a little bit more responsibility. So what's he saying? He's saying that it's been negative attention, and although it's been funny, he kind of feels that he has been ridiculed or something like that.
Yeah, and I just have to relook now, which is bad because it means I've clicked the link again, which means they're getting more. Yeah, he just said I'm trying to laugh about it, but I felt terrible, and I'm thankful to my friends' support, and it just seems like they're quite a shy person, and that's the thing. When I think of stories like this, part of me thinks about myself in that situation, and I'd find it quite funny because I have no shame really. But obviously not everyone's got their mentality. And he said the journalist world worries about cases of bullying throughout Italy and around the world, and then publishes these articles that for a more sensitive person could have done a lot of harm. Because you could just end up being known as that person for the rest of your life.
That's the problem, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing. I think that's it. I think it's a lack of empathy. It's thinking, it's just a laugh. It's it's funny, and if your knob's popping out, that's not too bad. No, no one's going to have a bit of an issue with that, are they? Because it's quite. But like people are totally different, especially like athletes who are kind of in the zone, and they're not always not everyone gets like a huge amount of like media training or even exposed to the media in the same way, and just it must be utterly demoralising to worry that is the thing that you're going to be known for, and the impact that it has on your teammates and the impact it has on people in your country, and I wonder if when like Paula Radcliffe, when that situation happened to her where she had to kind of relieve herself, that I bet she's done. I wonder how much has really affected her, because that's for all of her achievements. When you think of Paula Radcliffe, a lot of people will think of that first. You're like, well, what was her like? A marathon record time. What marathons did she? What do you know her first for? It's a kind of iconic picture, which you can't. And part of that was that it was on live TV as well, and so turning maybe.
But thankfully, she has those achievements. She had those achievements to build up the other stories.
Yeah,
because the issue is, if the biggest story is, if that was the biggest story, that's what we'd remember. And she thankfully has enough other stories, but it still comes up in interviews, and it's still. But then even talking about the response to it, is that feeding it?
Well, if you don't talk about the response to it, then you can't do anything about it. That's the thing. It does inadvertently. It does feed it, but at some point, I think people do need to talk about the response to these type of things. What do you think do badders? When you see that kind of stuff, does it make you feel like icky, or does it make you just think, well, if people didn't talk about it so much, including us, then it would kind of blow over, and he can kind of get on with his life, and does it have a bigger impact if you're at your started career, maybe you don't have other achievements, or is it worse if you're well known for something? I'd be really interested, because I'm sure you've got some other examples of where that may have played out.
And this was at the under-20s championship as well. So this is a young athlete, which typically means someone's not quite as robust in how they're not used to the exposure. No. Now, there's so much to talk about this week. I'll quickly cram this one in just because. But did you see that Jessica Ennis Hill's former coach has been banned for life?
No. What for?
Yeah. So banned for life by UK Athletics over sexually inappropriate conduct, and this is one of those ones where it's quite shocking, just because they're such a high profile coach, and nothing's kind of been hinted at or said before, but also kind of reading through it makes me realise how much of things like being seen as a bully, or things like being seen as having bad impact on people's mental health or well-being, or making sexist remarks or inappropriate sexual remarks, is so much about context and tone that we can just never tell. And so and what one person can dismiss as banter, which is banter with some people, isn't banter with other people. It's completely inappropriate. And so...
Or it can be, or in many cases, it can be banter with someone, but then when they're in a different mood, the same thing is suddenly, or situations happen to them, or something else, that same bit of banter then turns into something that's offensive. So even with the same person, the context can change the same remark.
So the things that were highlighted were making inappropriate sexual references and gestures to athletes, including mimicking female genitalia and oral sex, talking about his penis as spicy Italian sausage. So, and what other things? Engaging in sexually physical behaviour. I mean, dry humping to mimic sexual activity. And so, I mean, one of them was touching athlete's breast, which, yeah, I mean, that's clearly, there's never a good time to do that. I'm not saying there's a good time to do dry humping, but that could sway more into...
You're implying there is an appropriate time to talk about a spicy Italian sausage, though.
But I mean, this is where it's so difficult, because I if we were having a conversation and I said my spicy Italian sausage, you'd probably find it quite funny. And if I was with male athletes as a coach and talked about my spicy Italian sausage, it may be quite funny to them. And it partly depends on the age difference, the context, all of those things. But then now that we're should it be okay to say something to men that's not okay to say to women? And there is a different power dynamic, but then the age of the individuals changes the power dynamic as well, and the friendship and so this one just seems like you look at it and you think, I have no... for example, engaging in inappropriate and sometimes aggressive behaviour and emotional abuse, including one athlete being made to sit with a cone on their head to mimic a dunce's cap. So that again is all of these things, other than the inappropriate touching of breasts, which, yeah, I mean, that's just bad. All of these things could be seen in some circumstances as terrible, or as, if you were doing them with your friends, inappropriate, but in a way that, if consensual, could be quite fun to the individual. So, yeah.
One of us went to boarding school, one of us didn't.
Yeah, I mean, but would you...
But I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Again, there's like you say, it's background, context. It's difficult though, isn't it, with coaching, because coaching is a weird environment in the sense that there's a power dynamic at play, and also that power dynamic is associated with your income. It's almost there's almost an employer-employee relationship that it isn't called employer-employee, but you working with a coach and doing particular things is tied to your income, tied to your well-being, tied to your career. And so I wonder, I think the issue is, isn't it, is that when stuff like that happens, it might not always seem in the moment that it's inappropriate, but then when it becomes persistent, or when other things emerge, then you kind of view it again in a different light, and then it happens again, and it's an issue. Again, it's a, so you're saying that it kind of this hasn't been talked about before, and it's been banned, and nothing was really really kind of like said before. So I take it, if he's been banned, then it's been very much found that all of these claims are true, all these claims are substantial, and yeah. Jessica is one of the people who has contributed. No,
she's just said she's not really said much, from what I can tell, other than saying that she finds the claims upsetting.
Yeah.
So that suggests that if you find something upsetting, it almost, I think there's an element of surprise in that. His ex-wife's defended them and said the allegations don't add up. So it's really, really hard to know. Well, I guess you can never know, can you? The same with the Johnny Depp situation. You've no idea if a joke is, if something said is said as a joke, or if something said is horrific.
Yeah.
And so, but how do you given that a lot of friendships and relationships are based on just saying silly things, is it ever possible to have a friendship relationship? Like, do you have to just be purely professional and not have no friendship in any way?
Well, isn't I think the coaching thing, isn't it? I don't. Okay, no. not knowing enough about how it's done, or how it's thing. I think it's the situations arise when someone is given almost carte blanche to impose their coaching style on something that that they are. The way that they've done things is the way they always do things. So yeah, and they're using that as the reason for why they continue, like shouting at people, bullying people, treating people in a certain way because they've got results they've associated with it. Surely the way to stop that is to have almost like mixed coaching teams whereby you have a mix of ages and stuff like that who are in that coaching environment, who are coaches, who are either assistant coaches or working with a coach like that. And when situations like that arise, they're the ones who are able to say, look, I don't think that was appropriate to you have a quiet word with that person, or I think we might have gone too far with that last coaching thing, and to kind of almost like as a check and balance. I don't know. That's how you stop errors from happening. And you stop problems, right? And you stop people's prejudice from happening in other walks of life, in like other professions. You always have someone else there. You have, 2 or 3 people who are able to give, who can stand up to that person, has the confidence to say when they've gone over the line, to say when they think they've made a mistake, to say when they think things, regardless of the seniority. And you have that, and and that's what balances things out and makes sure things improve going forward. And you do that in other walks of life, in medicine, in everything else. So surely,
and to be fair,
creating
you're right.
mixed teams
In an office environment, and actually, I would never never say things like my spicy Italian sausage or dry hump, or they are. I guess it also becomes that blend of you are spending huge amounts of time with individuals, where then having 2 people and having that, as you say, that checks and balances, it just becomes very hard to actually have that without massive investment as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think in a lot of these cases, isn't it, where you've got these coaching teams where it's a coach and it's got like 3 or 4 people, and it's them kind of imposing their will on them, or them just teaching very close. It's like, well, that's. I don't know. It's just the dynamic is so overwhelming in the coach's favour, isn't it? Especially if it's an experienced coach and they're younger, and and you're trying to get the best out of them, and you're trying to because a lot of the, I suppose we look at this in a military environment. If you're in a military environment, and the kind of humour that they have in the military environment in order to get through kind of like the situations they are is it's a mix of I imagine it gets filthy very, very quickly, and that's kind of, it's both what bonds the team, but the dynamic is skewed in that as well. But eventually that dynamic changes. That the whole thing is about the team being kind of together. You take your orders, but the team being together. Whereas I suppose in that small environment, that dynamic doesn't change, and that dynamic won't change. Those athletes will not at any point be equal to the coach, and so anything that coach does has the potential to impose on them without them being able to come back on it, which is I suppose I don't know what are because all the athletics organisations and coaching organisations say that they're dealing with it, but what are they doing? What are they doing to put those checks and balances? It can't replacing coaches completely with someone who isn't, as they would be like traditionally old school, is one thing. But then you're taking, huge experience out of the system as well, and people that have got results. And whether you're never going to really change a coach and their methods and everything as well. So I don't know what have they done to do that. I mean, you always hear about when they ban people.
Do that? How do you do that nationwide when it's hard to get volunteers to? Most coaches aren't professional coaches who are, lapping in luxury. They're passionate individuals who are helping out people at the club and trying to help people go through. So, I guess it just comes down to more training and guidance for coaches. which
And who's supposed to deliver that? England
yeah,
Athletics.
yeah.
Fucking,
And
that's
in
never
the same way
gonna
you
done.
get, yeah, well, but that's the thing you get. There's all this coaching that how to be a run leader,
Yeah.
and things along those lines. And there's an element of me that thinks this is just blatantly obvious, and it's ticking boxes for the sake of ticking boxes. But then actually, you almost need to do that to ensure that people who it isn't obvious that you shouldn't make those comments, or it isn't obvious that there is a power dynamic that needs to be appreciated at all times, that guidance is actually given, and there is that chance to educate and change behaviour.
Is that what they teach on those run leader programs?
I don't think they do there, no. But I've not been through any of the EA certification just because I can't bothered. But
anyone that has, if you listen, like, what do they cover? What do you, like if you are stepping up as a coach? What training or what do you go through that may feed into what we're talking about? Because I think that'd be really insightful to see whether, considering the amount of things that are coming out as an issue, you'd think now it would be the time to feed things in terms of appropriateness and even selecting who are coaches and vetting who become coaches, especially at levels where they don't have the resources. That would be that. We'd love to find that out.
Yeah. So do bad. Let us know. Letters at badboyrunning.com. If you've got any guests you want us to interview or subjects to talk about in the future, then email me, David at badboyrunning.com. I'm going to put a question in the group, actually, a poll about UTMB, and just to see from those people who've done it before, do they think it will work? Do they think it can work for the elite runners? Is it profiteering, or is it genuinely driven environmental impact? So give us your feedback in the group and we'll read it out next time.
And if you're not in the group, head over to Facebook, type in Bad Boy Running Podcast, answer 2 questions and jump in. If you want some merch, please head to store.badboyrunning.com. I've just realised as I'm sat here, I look like a dodgy coach who's just been done, and now I'm like kind of silhouetted here about talking about I didn't realise it was inappropriate movie to say those kind of things, like in my prison cell. I just noticed that we kind of I've stepped into the context of the thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, true. You're living and breathing what we're saying, and we've got a fair few bits of listener feedback. Mostly around Nigel Benn being a Nigel we should appreciate.
But they keep saying, but everyone's got, I shouted Nigel Benn. Not even Nigel. The expert in Nigel said Nigel Benn. So if it wasn't obvious to Nigel, it's not obvious to us.
Yeah, and but there's also Gary House, Coach Gary House. He sent in an article that he'd read. We'd been talking about the Nigerian world record that had gone on the 100-meter hurdles, and the comments made by Michael Johnson to do with something being wrong with the timings.
Yeah,
and there was just this general feeling of the insanity of the times. So it turns out actually Amasan had been using shoes that were different to the other runners, and so she was actually using the Adidas shoes that are great for kind of 10,000 meter runners. And so they're more springy, they're more responsive, but people hadn't thought to do it for the hurdles. And so she was actually using these slightly springier shoes, and she thinks that's partly what's helped because it just, I guess, particularly in jumping, if you can reduce the energy you need to use going up and you can put it all forward and it just brings you there, that's going to be hugely advantageous. So that's the secret, and whether we're going to see suddenly all the athletes changing to run. It was the Adidas Adizero Avanti shoes designed for 5 and 10k runners rather than track spikes. So that's their secret. So if you're a hurdler at home, and you're wondering how to get a little bit faster, give them a try and let us know whether you know there's a difference. And there is also a question mark about whether a similar change of shoes helped in the Swedish pole voters' gold medal as well. But yeah, thanks for that, Gary. Explains it all. So, and that's nice actually to hear in some ways when you see a big jump that there is an answer rather than being a question mark around, question mark around the athlete. They're just being smart and use technology.
Yeah, nice.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. And please do subscribe, rate, and review. And we will speak to you next time.
See you later.
Bye 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 bye.
Bye 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 bye.
Fuck you, buddy.